That is awesome. I know where it's going to take us. We're vying moon. Tap your neighbor, say, we're vying moon. This is awesome. There's such a sense of expectation in open house at the moment, and it's a story of what God is doing in our church, actually, in that someone said it the other day, it's like a feeding frenzy. It's like people are just so excited for more of God, and that's quite an exciting space to be in, because in the Old Testament, when God would send manna, look at you, Slevy. Look at those biceps. When God would send manna in the desert, each leader of the tent would be responsible for going and collecting food for their people. And the simple instruction was to go and take as much as you have need. That was the instruction. And the other part of the instruction was don't keep any for tomorrow. So eat what you need today. Some had many, some had much, some had little, but all had what they needed, and none was left for tomorrow. And I love the fact that our church is arriving in every environment, whether it's Sunday, whether it's small groups. I mean, we're seeing that in our small group as well. An incredible sense of food being provided for people for the season of life that they're in, and they're just taking what they have need. And I think open house is just another story of that. You come this morning, some of you just need a bit of worship, and you take your worship with you and you get back into the war room of the week. Some of you need to be encouraged in the stories of the church and reminded of the part that we get to play in this amazing story, and that's your food. We all eat differently. We all follow at different distances, if you like. But I love the fact that we're hungry. And we're hungry for our own good food, but also in the fact that God is calling us to serve others with that. Last week, we spoke about VUCA. If you didn't get to see it, I would encourage you. All this Tuesday content's actually online now, because we realize that often it's a word in season for a business. It's a moment. It's a catalyst moment for somebody. So although Sunday is a story God is unfolding to the broad community, it seems like Tuesdays God's taking us maybe a little bit deeper, maybe helping us get more practical about the message from a weekend. And so it's all online. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. Subscribe if you like, and that way it will be sent to you, and you don't have to go looking for it. And so we spoke about VUCA. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous is the way that many would describe the current state of the world we live in. I don't think any of us are arguing that point. I think all of us are agreeing that the world is volatile, that there is an uncertainty to what is going on around us, not just in South Africa, globally there is uncertainty. There is complexity to life that is increasing. It used to be just a few people seeing each other every day at the local spa, and now it's Facebook watching you and you watching others, and this person's opinion of you and your opinion of others is complicated. Tap your neighbor, says complicated. All right? And then it's ambiguous. It can go either way. Like, what is truth? What isn't truth? What is right? What isn't right? There's actually so much opinion. There's so much possibility that sometimes it's a bit ambiguous. Like, what are we actually meant to be doing with our days? And so this amazing word VUCA, or acronym, has become quite a buzzword in the world. And I've wanted our church to become a bit more aware of it, because if you can't see the world as VUCA, you won't understand what we're meant to bring as leaders. So if the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, then as leaders, which is you and I, it's not just me, it's not just you if you're a CEO, it's all of us leading our sphere of influence. John Maxwell calls it 360-degree leadership. We lead up, we lead down, we lead around. But all of us are leading our sphere of influence. That starts with our families, moves into our friendships, carries on into our business places, and obviously in the life of this church, we carry a leadership mantle. And the way we bring new direction, or the way we bring life to VUCA, is the opposite. We bring vision to the volatile, we bring understanding to the uncertain, we bring clarity to the complex, and we bring agility to the ambiguous. And we lead people forward. We lead people forward. Now on the weekend, obviously, I spoke about courage to climb, and I've had some great feedback. I appreciate the feedback. I often feel like messages like that are ones that were just birthed in the quiet space of my own heart. It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't like Prism is going to go here, here, and here. It was like Prism went here, here, and Slevy spoke, and I heard something God wanted to kind of amplify in my heart, and it was about the courage to climb before we experience what is on top. And it's been amazing to hear the feedback. But I've also just been thinking a little bit more about climbing, and a little bit more around what climbing looks like for you. Because for some of us, and there were examples given, but for some of us it is a marriage climb. And although you can identify it, it's not always easy to activate something toward it. Some of you, it is a financial climb. And that's a scary one, because we don't want people to know we're struggling financially. It starts to show in everything that we are and do. So just a heads up, you can relax, because actually financial struggles show everywhere. not just on your bank accounts, as do marriage struggles, as do anything. We start to wear it. You know what we call it? Stress. But when we aren't climbing with faith, we are typically avoiding it by fear. And I've been really stirred around this idea of climbing the mountains of faith, because that's what Caleb did. He was a faith man. He was one of two. Someone once said it's often just two that need to take hold of God's promise. The other 10 can have a party, but two keep leading forward. And I've always believed that God wants our church to be the two. Jesus one, we two. And so I just think that there's a real charge for the church to get courage in their hearts to pursue the promises of God, to have courage to climb the mountains like Caleb did, if you like. And then I came across this article yesterday by a guy by the name of Carey Nieuwhof. Now, he's a great leadership voice. I encourage you to go and subscribe to him. I won't kind of take the credit for much of what I'm going to share today. It's Carey Nieuwhof. In fact, what I love about him is he actually interviews people that are their best at what they do and then shares that with the world. So he already is collaborating. That makes him, we looked at that last week, agile. He's one of the most sought after leadership voices in the Christian world at the moment. In fact, his podcast, I think, has just gone over 14 million downloads in a few short years, I think 3 years. So he's ramping up his influence, and all he does is he interviews people that have walked a road, gained some experience, carry some wisdom, and then he shares that with the world. That's good leadership. Why would we need to be coming up with all the solutions when others carry them in them? So that's one of the things I'm passionate about, is telling you that the goal is on the inside. It's not in me. I will just activate what's already in you. And then you will go and change your business, and you will go and change your marriage, and you will go and change the world. Not me, you will. It's in you. Tap your neighbor, say it's in you. And so I wanted to speak a little bit about fear, because as I said, I feel like when it comes to the mountains of life, climbing is by faith, avoiding is often by fear. And it's kind of challenging because sometimes we look at a mountain, let's call it a new business adventure, let's call it perhaps a journey within your marriage, let's call it some sickness that you're facing or fighting. And we look at the mountain, and for all of us it's different. But what happens when the mountain that we're climbing isn't obvious that God has called us to be faithful? In other words, it's a business dream, and I'm not sure if that's a mountain I'm meant to climb or if that's actually caution I'm meant to exercise. Like I gave the example of going to Mshlanga. And I wasn't sure if Mshlanga was just an exciting faith adventure or a caution in God to wait on His timing. How do you know that sometimes? So when I say, like, get your mountain, everyone leaves the church on Sunday, oh my word, and I'm just thinking, probably 10 new businesses started up yesterday morning, you know? And people are buying things that they shouldn't be buying because they heard about a mountain that God wasn't actually calling them to. But I can't control all that. I can only challenge the mountain and the courage to climb. But what I did think was important was understanding is, when is God calling me by faith to not climb the mountain? Or when is it actually fear that is stopping me from not climbing the mountain? So is it faith that keeps me turning? Is it faith that keeps me rested and waiting patient? Or is it fear that keeps me avoiding the mountains of life? What stops us moving forward is the question I'm actually trying to answer here today. And Carey Nieuwhof's article is brilliant, and it's around fear, because what he says is, if you can identify that it's fear preventing you, then you will know what faith might look like. All right? So I'm going to help you see whether fear is actually the thing preventing you climbing the mountains, not God's wisdom saying, don't do it now. Because we can sometimes give that to God and say, God, I think it's you that's telling me not to do this, but we're actually just scared. All right? So I'm going to help you with that today and help you climb mountains in faith. I love how Carey Nieuwhof says, you can't follow fear. Why? Because fear doesn't know where it's going. Fear only knows where it's not going. So we're going to talk about fear. You can't follow fear. Fear is a terrible God. You cannot follow fear. So fear will never lead us up a mountain, all right? Only faith will. But sometimes faith keeps us from stepping onto the wrong mountain. How do you know if it's not fear? You see, fear is a terrible God. How do we identify fear in our lives? You might be surprised to hear this, but at the beginning of this year, I did a short 6-week course on neuroscience online. I know, why would you do that? You're a pastor. I get it. But people's brains are powerful, and we don't access them, myself included, all right? And there are 4 parts of a brain, the limbic system. I won't go into all the detail. There are 4 kind of typical parts, but this one over here is what we call the reptilian brain. Have you heard of that before? The reptilian brain, all right? It's signified by fight, flight, and freeze. That's what it causes you to do, all right? That's its job. This brain only kicks in when we're under stress, okay? It's part of a big brain system. There's a whole lot going on in your brain. There's hormones triggering things that the brain's then responding to, that the habits then are compensating for. But at the end of the day, we have this little, we call it the lizard brain, in the back end of our brain system over here. They call it the reptilian or the mammalian brain. And what happens is when it perceives stress, we're the only breathing creatures on the planet that kick into stress mode when it actually isn't existent. So we're the only animals only kick into stress mode when they're actually under threat, which is why people will say to you, don't go out there scared of snakes. They're scared of you. They're only going to do something if they're legitimately under threat, if you're in their way, in their path, and coming toward them. They're not going to trigger stress while they're lying on the riverbanks and they hear that you're going out for a little ride with your family. Oh, this is disastrous. We better go and find them and bite them. But we do. That's what I'm trying to say. We perceive stress that is nowhere near our family, and we start planning toward it. And it occupies all of our minds and all of our brains and all of our thinking and ultimately all of our actions. Now, here's a few things you need to know about this brain just before I give you 5 steps to identify fear. All right? This brain triggers when it's under pressure, and it takes over. It's a very automatic part of our brain system. And it's the most archaic part of our brain system. It's a one-track pony. Here's the track: fight, flight, freeze. It doesn't come up with new ways to respond to situations. It isn't strategizing new situations. It's literally fighting, flighting, or freezing. And all of us respond in different ways. Some of us bias toward a fight mode, some of us toward a flight mode, get out of here, and some toward a freeze mode, just pretend this isn't happening, all right? But the reality is that under pressure, this part of our brain, the reptilian brain, it takes over. I just need you to hear that word. It takes over. When you perceive stress, it kicks in a big way. When you perceive that your marriage isn't where you want it to be and it becomes like a stress, my marriage is going to end, you just hand it over to your reptilian brain and you're going to do one of 3 things. You're going to fight, flight, or freeze. Anyone identify? All right? When you feel like my money's running out, I'm going to have none left by the end of the month, all right? You're not thinking, oh, you know what I might do is, this thing kicks over, the reptilian brain, it takes over. And you start to fight. You start to prove yourself. You start to work, burn the candle at both ends. That's fight. You start to flight. Let's just get out of here. Let's book a one-way ticket to New Zealand. We're never coming back again. Let's leave all our debts on South African shores. I'm just being honest, right? That's what happens when you perceive stress. Fear preempts stress. You can't climb mountains when you're facing fears. Fears cripple us. They put stress in our lives that take over our operating system. All right? Fear is a crippler. It's not a distraction. It's a destroyer. Fear holds you steady. Fear takes you nowhere. I love it how Carrie Newhoff said, the thing about fear is you can't follow it because it's not going anywhere. It's just staying put. By the way, this brain over here can only do 2 things. It only does one thing. It protects you. It's a good brain, by the way. When you're under pressure in the bush and you see a lion, it says, get out of here. All right? When you're in horrible situations, sometimes even in life, in family, in volatile situations, this can kick in a healthy way and say, get back. It's going to protect you. But it can't progress you. And I want you to hear that, because when your life is governed by fear, and you'll be able to tell me that just in a moment, or tell yourself when we look at the 5 kind of yardsticks of is fear governing your life. When it's governed by fear, stress is taken over. And when stress is taken over, you may be protected, but you ain't going to progress. And I don't believe God has called us to be a church that is protected without progress. That's why he said, for God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And that word power is not power of our hands, forced power. It's the power of our hearts, confidence to move forward despite what we face. So he's given us the power, sound mind, spirit of fear, power, love, and a sound mind to move forward beyond stress, all right? You get the picture. God doesn't want us to live here. This kicks in automatically when it needs to. Just don't be living here. Well, let's identify if you and I are living there. Because you're probably going, I don't live there. I got courage. I also thought that until I read this article and I realized there's some genuine fear stuff that I face, because I would say I'm like, I don't fear, I'm not scared of anything, And that's not meant to be an arrogant statement. That's meant to be my God voice going like, I'm not scared. Come on, bring it on, devil. I'm up for it, And then I read this and I realized there are some things that I'm not facing that are actually genuine fears, and they're keeping me back from progressing into what God has for me because that part of my brain's taken over in that sphere of my life. Let me help you, all right? 5 things to check out if fear is controlling your life. The first is you avoid doing the right thing because you fear a backlash. How do I know if stress is stopping me from climbing mountains? How do I know if it's fear that's stopping me from climbing, not faith telling me to wait? Well, first up, you're avoiding doing the right things because you fear certain backlashes. Think about that for a moment. I love it how Carey Nieuwhof said, he said, fear makes you sell your soul. Not all at once, but in little pieces over time. I should have done that. It's the right thing to do, but I didn't because I was scared of the response. I should have done that. It's the right thing to do, but I didn't because I was scared of the response. By the way, in schooling system, I can see this is where fear gets into our children. Because they're challenged by peer pressure and they know the right thing to do, but they choose not to. And the first time it's not a big deal. The second time it's not. The third, fourth, fifth. But by the 100th time, it's become a standard response. They choose not to do the right thing because they're fearful of the backlash. Stress has just taken over, and in any relational circle, they are now fighting, flighting, or freezing instead of activating a new way. By the way, you went through school too. It's probably in you too. Peer pressure got a hold of you at some stage. Can be in different environments, and little pieces over time avoid you from confronting the right thing to do because you're actually scared of a backlash. You stop being a person of great principle and you start being a pragmatist, not in the best sense of pragmatism, but calculated pragmatism at its worst. In other words, you plan your way around the very thing you're meant to go through. You even lose respect for yourself in the process. It can get to a point where you're actually going, I don't even want to do this thing anymore because it's exhausting. What's exhausting is you're living from this space. This can't last for long. It keeps you protected, but it doesn't progress you. We're designed by God to progress. The Bible says from glory to glory to glory. John 1:16, grace upon grace upon grace. We're designed to progress. And so if you're living your life scared of doing the right thing for fear of backlash, eventually you become so protected, you actually go, I just don't even want to do this anymore. I think I might be speaking to some people already. The second yardstick to see whether the fear is stopping you from climbing a mountain, and by the way, you're born to climb mountains, just need to make that clear, is that you imagine the reactions to change more than you imagine the benefits of change. Can I say it again? You spend more time imagining reactions to change than imagining benefits to change. I'm not saying you're critical. You're just preoccupied by the negative possible outcomes instead of the possible outcomes. That's fear. If when exciting change is presented, if when fresh faith is put forward, if when things in the church are challenged to us to step in and to lean in, to be generous, to give our time, to serve our community. Those are all elements of change in us. Those are not things we do naturally. We need to be changed into that space. We are being transformed by the renewing of our minds. Community matters. Generosity matters. Being kind to people matters. Our words matter. They create worlds. That's change. That's not normal. That's change. And when your response to change is more imaginative around what it's going to produce in the negative sense rather than the positive, you're living out of fear. And fear is taking over, and you're probably in fight, flight, or freeze mode toward change. Maybe this is helping you understand why you have aversion. Some of you are going, I love change, and then something changes in your marriage, you hate change. So it's not true. Just because it's true of one part of your life doesn't make it true of all. Just because you're stressed out in one part of your life doesn't mean you're stressed out in all. It's one of the devil's tactics, by the way. When you're scared of something, he makes you scared of everything. He makes you feel like you're scared of everything, but you're not. You're just scared of heights. You're good at business. You're great at marriage. You can lead your children. You're just scared to climb above 10 meters. It's okay. You know what I'm saying? But the devil makes you think you're a scaredy cat. You're not a scaredy cat. You just have fear issues within a certain environment. And maybe today God is going to help you see that environment, actually see what it is and break through it so that you can live on the high ground that God has for you. Climb the mountain. Tap your neighbor and say, climb the mountain. All right, so you imagine reactions to change more than you imagine benefits to change. If this is true, you've stopped running a fence. You're on the defense. Everything is defensive. Everything is like but. You're only running defense. You stop leading out of conviction, and now you're only worried about how people will react. I'm not just talking about your reaction to change or your family's. I'm talking about you now worrying about people that you shouldn't be worrying about and their reaction to change. You're fearful. And fear will keep you stationary instead of climbing the mountain of leadership and influence. We don't need to be worrying about the change that affects everyone around us. We need to be owning, is it God's story for me and for my family and for our church? Then for sure it'll be blessings to everyone else. When you won't lead because of anticipated reaction, fear has won. All right. Is this helping anybody? I think if we're all honest, many of us are anticipating too many reactions instead of just embracing the change God is calling us to. All right, number 3. You decide not to say something because you're afraid of the response. Now we're talking words. Not doing, we're talking saying. You decide not to say something because you're afraid of the response. No, that's not really why I don't want to confront that thing, Dill. It's more just like I don't really want to make a mountain out of a molehill. No, the mountain is what's necessary for you to climb to higher ground. It's not a mountain instead of a molehill. It's a mountain because that's where faith lies. And the confrontational conversation that you're struggling to have because you're actually scared of how it will end up for you is stopping you climbing to the high ground of relational currency. And so you're hanging around in the devil's playground where every relationship takes yards of energy and extreme stress and all this kind of stuff because you're managing them so cautiously instead of courageously stepping into confrontational moments with a smile, with joy. I'm not talking about telling people how to get off the bus. I'm talking about being able to look at each other in the eyes, smile, and confront the hard stuff with our words. If you're deciding not to say something to people you love because you're afraid of the response, your reptile's taken over. And I just need to say this again. It's the most archaic of our brain structure. Is old school, is got zero agility. And so if you aren't in a healthy way confronting conversations with your words, fear is taking over and you will not move forward a stitch. You will hang around on the low ground, whereas God's called you to the high ground of the mountains. Eventually fear, I love this, he says, eventually fear doesn't just impact your decisions, it cripples conversations that actually lead to great action. So actually some of the greatest actions in the world on the other side of helpful confrontational conversations. And what fear does is it cripples those. And so marriages never get the breakthrough because we never have the hard conversations. Friendships never move forward because we never seek counsel from otherwise friends. Businesses never make the breakthrough relationally because they're scared to admit that they don't know all the answers and they need a third party to come and help them strategize. You know what I'm saying? I love it how he said, sometimes fear teaches you to unfriend the truth. Okay, next one. Your reactions are becoming increasingly unhealthy. Guilty. This got me. Honest pastor moment. Don't tell the big church, please. They think I'm perfect. I'm only joking. Your reactions become unhealthy. Often we get angry at fear, but we get angry in healthy ways, in unhealthy ways. Rather than staring fear in the face, we take our frustration out on someone or something else. It shows up as aggressive driving. Or maybe you can't control things at work anymore, so you try and control everything in your home. I love this because some of us are full on relaxed, but most of us are hyped up and intense. And we show our anger in different ways. We become controlling. Maybe we're not just vocally angry or abusive with our words, but we're controlling with our ways. And the more you try and control things, the more things control you. You fly off the handle with your spouse or with your kids. Just the other day, honest moments, I was trying to teach one of my children to ride a bicycle, and she wasn't willing to climb from the small bike onto the big bike. And I encouraged her a few times just nicely, and she didn't do it. And eventually I said, this is ridiculous. What's the point of even trying this? And she looked at me and I said, honestly, you got a big bike, you got a small bike. It's a waste of time. This is exactly where you should be riding. Don't judge me. I'm just being honest as a parent right now. This is exactly where you should be riding. I dropped the bike. I said, you decide when you want to climb on the big bike. I'm going to go and sit inside. To which she looked at me and she said, Daddy, that's so unfair. How many of you get like that with your spouse, with your children, with your colleagues, with the church? Your reactions are unhealthy because you're driven by fear, not faith. Faith is never driven by unhealthy reactions. Nothing that's produced in our lives that's unhealthy has been produced by faith. It's come out of fear. So here's a question. Where are there unhealthy responses to life in your life? Because the root of that probably is this little horrible little thing called stress and fear. And if you can identify it, you can move through it. He says sometimes being the nice guy at work when you should have been the brave guy at work means you stop being the nice guy at home. That's all there is. Okay, last one. Hope this is helping. And this is the biggest one for me. Honestly, yardstick. Am I being held back by fear, or is it God telling me not to go? I don't know. You check the yardsticks. Tell me what you think. The fifth one is you've stopped dreaming. This is hands down the worst yardstick of fear driving your life. You've stopped dreaming. You say, Dill, I'm not a dreamer. No, you are a dreamer. If you're not dreaming, somewhere along the line, fear got a hold of you and told you weren't allowed to dream. You don't have to teach a child to dream. They all dream. All of them. And in increasing levels or decreasing levels, their dreams slow down. Until one day we become adults and someone says, what's your gift or what's your strength or what's your thing? You're like, I'm just a get it done kind of person. I'm just like a hard yards. I'm just like stick to the basics. What do you dream of for your life? No, I don't have a dream for my life. No, but you do have a dream for your life. God gave, when you were 2, you were doing stuff that was part of your dream. You were building things, you were painting things, you were doing stuff with people. It was very natural when you were 2. You were just dreaming your world up. You were imagining the future as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, effortlessly. And now you're telling me you don't have a dream. No, you do have a dream. You're just too scared to confront it. If you're sitting in this room today going, I'm not sure what the dream of my life is, I'm telling you, God wants to get in the middle of that thing and put faith back where there's fear. Because that's not a healthy thing. That's a devil thing. To not have a dream is not to be humble. It's to avoid God's call of your life. You've stopped dreaming. It's the worst thing. When I see people that can't dream of a better tomorrow, when I see people that can't imagine a greater future, and I've been there, I know what it feels like to get to a place where I'm like, I can't even think straight. I can't even expand tomorrow because the devil has me trapped in today. I'm in protective mode, not progress mode. God wants to shift the church into progress mode. If these are yardsticks, I encourage you, flip the action, flip it around so that God can get you on the front foot again and help you climb some mountains. When we stop dreaming, it's a sure sign that fear has won. You stop leading, listen to this, when you stop dreaming, you stop leading from what's possible and you start leading from what's probable. How many of you know this world, without the love of God and the power of Him in our lives, leads by what's probable? We can kind of expect where tomorrow goes, therefore we can plan toward it. I go, let's shape tomorrow. Let's change tomorrow. Let's build South Africa into a beautiful nation. I love the language that Kath brought in a while ago. Let's re-author the story of South Africa. Just now when Slevy was like, come on, rename some things. I just keep hearing this whole idea of racism being renamed as a rainbow. Like I just keep thinking of it. Like we don't need to navigate racism. It's a done deal. We need to build a rainbow. We need to move forward. We're not trying to protect something. We're progressing towards something new. What are you doing in your life where dreaming has been kept? I just got to be so passionate for anyone who hears this even through our online feed. I just want to encourage you, start dreaming again for your life. Hope is the hallmark of the Christian faith. Hallmark. The greatest contributor to the faith that changes the world is hope. What's possible? What could still happen? I wonder where my marriage might be tomorrow if I just confront some of the things that are actually fear holding me back in today. Hope dreams again. All right, let's close. How do you counteract all these? Simple. If you're going to have any fear, be afraid of this. Be afraid of not fulfilling God's mission in your life. And I'm not saying like, be afraid of letting God down. I'm just saying, be afraid of never confronting what it is that you've been born for, that stirs in you effortlessly, that comes out when you're alone staring at the bush, that is alive in you when you're close to Jesus. Confront that thing with courage and own it with everything. Be afraid not to put that thing down, and the rest of these things will become not easy, but doable. Amen? Come on, let's stand.